And in three, two, one. Hello and welcome to another episode of Guide to the Grind. My name, as always, is Jeff Eady. Joining me today is one of my favorite people, one of Canada's favorite mortgage brokers, and the white sandy beach to my bleak January day, Mr. Jonathan Tilger. Jonathan, how are you today?
Well, white sandy beach, that only means snow on the beach up here right now. I'm doing absolutely phenomenal. How about yourself, Jeff?
I am pretty awesome. Happy to be on our second episode of season four. I believe this is our 141st or 142nd episode, Jonathan. So we've been doing this pretty consistent for a while. Happy about that. If anybody wants to know more about what we're doing, you can always go to guidetothegrind.com or mortgageplan.com. If you like what you're hearing here, please do us a favor, like, share, comment. All those things help us get these great messages out here. But today, Jonathan, I am super excited to have somebody we had to reschedule. She was scheduled just before Christmas, but I had an emergency I had to run to. But I get to introduce her today, and I'm really excited for this conversation. She has spent the last 20 years helping people achieve financial freedom by enabling them to find the perfect franchise opportunities. Her skill for matching a client's background, interests, skills, finances, and life goals to the ideal opportunity has made her one of the top franchise consultants in the country. Today, we're here to pick her brain and give some insight into what can seem like a daunting process, deciding on the perfect franchise to enable you to gain financial freedom. Please welcome to the show, Kim Daly. Kim, how are you today?
I am good, Jeff. Thank you for that introduction.
That's the first one I've had to read of 2024, and I didn't screw it up. I'm really happy about that.
Good job.
So you're joining us all the way from New Hampshire. Thank you so much for joining us today. Kim, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you do and who you serve?
Okay, fantastic. So I help people build wealth using business cash flowing asset, but not by going out and starting a business all on your own, by leveraging a proven system, which is called a franchise, right? So people come to me, they're either real estate investors looking for diversification right now, or escaping the high interest rates, or they are W-2 employees looking for another source of income, maybe one they own and can control, or maybe they worry about their job stability. And so they're looking, wow, while I have my job, why don't I create something that I can own and control in case this job goes away? So those are kind of the people that typically find me in some state of transition, looking for options to put some money in a little bit of time and hopefully build and scale wealth. And I do everything that I do for free. I'll say that now. And you guys can ask me questions about that whenever you want.
Um, so how do you make money?
I love it. I am an angel, Jeff, and I do not work for money.
Well, you certainly seem like an angel, but even they need to eat.
You got it. I got two teenagers. So my services are free for my candidates. I am paid like a matchmaker. So I'm paid by the franchisors. So if you ended up going on and being awarded a franchise through my process, the franchisor would pay my consulting fee rather than you.
Nice, just like a mortgage broker would. The bank pays the mortgage broker, not the borrower.
Exactly. So it just helps the franchisors really maximize their time because they can come to consultants and say, look, we need owners who have these kind of backgrounds, who have this kind of personality, who have this much money, who live in these markets. So rather than coming to work every day and having an abundance of, emails to sift through from people who emailed in saying, and then not knowing if people are going to pick up the phone and talk to them or if they're even serious, they come to us and we do all that prospecting for them, get them teed up, and then if there's a match, we get paid.
So what's the process you go through somebody? I'm a prospective franchisor or franchisee. I'm looking at it, trying to say, how can I get an additional source of income? I need something to start. I'm a little bit familiar with the franchise process. I come to you. Listen, I'm currently working here. This is what I'm doing. I'm looking for something to diversify. What's the process? How do you start with me?
Okay, fantastic. So the way that I look at a franchise investment, it's really a vehicle driving outcomes. So I'm infinitely more interested, Jonathan, in what you want to achieve with the business. So let's daydream a little bit. I'm going to do a couple of exercises with you, some homework, and then we're going to get on the phone and we're going to hash this out in a consultation. But I want you to project forward 3 to 5 years, and I want you to think about your life, like how old you're gonna be, how old your kids are gonna be, where are you gonna be professionally? Where do you wanna be? Do you wanna have if you start with a job, do you wanna quit that job in 3 years? 5 years from now, do you wanna have managers in multiple locations? So, we do some daydreaming exercises about the vision of your life, personally, professionally, and financially. Once I have clarity there, it's funny how much I can really go with from there. But then we dive into kind of the nitty gritty of okay, when you show up as an owner in your business, are you showing up full time or semi absentee? Because when you own a business, you do have the option to be semi absentee with a full time manager. When you show up for your business, are you a leader of people or are you a leader of a sales process? It's kind of one or the other. Those are sort of the two distinct roles. So we really go through like a day in the life, what role you play visually. What do you see? Like, are you walking into a yoga studio? Like, this is my business. Or are you walking into an office suite, right? A more professional environment. Are you okay operating 7 days a week? Or do you want no nights, no weekends, no holidays? So, again, we're talking about the lifestyle you want before we ever talk about any specific brands. So, as you mentioned in the beginning, Jeff, I've been doing this for 22 years. So I have a lot of experience and a lot of relationships. I know who's who and what's what in franchising. So, based on all the criteria I learned about you, then I match that against my knowledge and my relationships to bring back my top 3 to 5 options that have open territory where you live or where you want your business to be. So you don't have to go out. There's thousands of companies out there. How would you even know where to begin, right? It's like walking into like a flooring store or a tile store, right? It's so overwhelming. You don't even know where to begin. And when you come to me, I'm going to curate, if you will, the list based on exactly what you told me you were looking for, what you want to achieve. And sometimes my criteria is I was telling somebody this earlier today. This is because he's a technical guy. I'm like, there's no algorithm for like, okay, you tell me these things and my brain spits out these 3 to 5. Sometimes it's like, wow, this guy's a veteran. Well, I know franchises that really cater to kind of the mentality of a veteran, where you're going to be able to go and validate with a lot of other franchise owners who are veterans. And that's going to help you resonate, right? When they tell you what they did in the military and what they're doing now, and you're like, oh my gosh, that guy sounds like me. It helps you make a connection, a deeper connection to the business. So ultimately, if or when you say yes to a franchise, what you're buying is people, not widgets. It's the who, not the what, that keeps a business growing, right? Go back to 2020. It's the who, the leadership of the franchise that kept the culture growing, that kept the fear at bay, that adapted the model to get doors reopened, not the what, not the widget, if you will. But always in franchising for 22 years, I've been telling people look up from the widget. Who cares what the business does, right? It matters more who you're doing business with. That's what's going to lead you to really not just the wealth, financial wealth, but the personal wealth, the satisfaction, right? The camaraderie you have, your ability to feel connected to the people that you're in business with.
You know, that's huge. Especially when you're choosing a business that you're trying to transition out of a life that maybe you don't want anymore. You want to spend time because let's face it, I've worked in offices and there's a lot of times where you come in and you just want to slam the door in somebody's face or far worse. If you're around people you enjoy being around, then the business itself doesn't really matter. You could be selling whatever, paint supplies, roofing, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you enjoy going to work every day.
It's
So
so true.
that being said, how do you vet the companies that you sponsor, I guess, for these franchisees?
Okay, excellent question. So I'm part of a franchise called Fran Choice. So my corporate office in Minneapolis, we have a team of people, and what they do full time for me is go to all the franchise events to figure out who are the up and coming brands, which brands should we maybe not be using anymore. They spend time talking to existing owners of companies that we do represent to make sure that the current owners are happy, they feel well trained, they're making the kind of money they thought they were going to make. Because if the people inside a franchise are not telling good stories, Why would I want to waste my new candidate's time? Right. And things change over time. Right. So my corporate office creates my inventory because that's a whole business in and of itself. So that I get to wake up every day, spend my time doing things like this and getting referrals from people I've already placed and making videos on YouTube because that's like my favorite thing to do. And and generating candidates who want to learn about the companies that are approved, that have agreed to pay me if I help them grow their brand, and that really are the best of the best in their category. So we have an inventory of say in franchising, we never really know exactly how many companies, but the International Franchise Association reports there's about 3 to 4,000 franchises out there. Where would you ever begin, right? So our inventory is about maybe 300, but I will tell you that I'm the number one consultant in the United States of America. I place more people into franchise businesses every year, and that's a true statement for the last 13 years. So I play at a very high level, and out of the companies that Franchise has approved, if you look at the number of, I usually have about 50 or so active investigations. My people are generally using the same companies because when you find the companies that are trending, the companies that have great validation, and company people fit sweet spots, so when people say certain things to me, I think, oh, these 5 or 10 companies based on my knowledge, or oh, they said this, it makes me think of this company. So I often use the same probably 50, 60 companies, and I'm then like the top person. So, I mean, I need new companies all the time, but my placements are very consistent because not every company out there is worth people's time. Just because they filed papers and call themselves a franchisor does not mean they're worth somebody's life savings.
So question for you on that, because you said that you're actually part of a franchise. So I sort of have a multi-part question here. You understand where I'm going as I get into this. So did you start with them and you sort of have built your 22-year career with them, or did you start independent and get involved with them? And I'm sort of asking this because are there scenarios where someone, say, starts an independent and then it makes sense at a certain point to perhaps join with a franchise because maybe they become stale, they're not quite sure where to go, and that can give them the growth motivation as well as camaraderie that they need?
That's a fantastic question. So let me tell you my story first, and we'll come back to the second part. So I've been with Franchoice since I was 29 years old. So I started here, but what happened is right out of college, I was on my way to medical school and I answered a classified ad in the newspaper for a telemarketing job that happened to be for a franchise company. So they offered me very quickly, they offered me a full-time job. And of course, my dad was like, don't do it. You're never going to go to med school. My dad was so right. But I was like, no, I'm totally going to med school, right? Like my dad, he loves that. He's always right. I'm like, I know you're always right. Even when you're 50 years old, your dad's always right. So anyway, he was right, but I was like, no, I mean, a year off just seems refreshing, learn business, something different than science. And I never went back. But what happened is I got the bug for entrepreneurship. I saw all these people in franchising. This whole industry is people helping people, people living their dreams. But I wasn't smart enough at the time to grasp that it's the franchise environment. I just grasped business ownership. So I decided to start my own company. I became an entrepreneur by the time I was 25. So I've been self-employed for 26 years. So I did that. But when I got out there on my own, I was immediately successful. I made money, but it was very like you're in it and on it all the time. Like you're always got to be thinking about what's coming next because where you are in business is going to like pass away. And so it was just like flying by the seat of my pants with like, is this really, where is this going? I was traveling all over the place and I'm like, I want to settle down. I want to meet a guy. I want to have a family. I was turning 30. So that's when I was like, you know what? I need people. I need systems. I need technology. I need something that I can get into and really stick to, like build some stability with. So that's when I turned back to franchising and I found the opportunity I'm a part of now. I had no idea, nobody did, that it would take me to the heights that it's taken me. Like this franchising has completely changed my life. It's why I'm so passionate about what I do because I have literally built and scaled wealth. I've made history in my industry 13 years ago when I built the largest franchise consulting business that had ever been built. And once I did that, that's the story that I share with my candidates. It's kind of the mindset coaching that I offer to them for free because I'm like, look, I was the same me from 2010 to 2011. Franchise was the same process. We were still in a recession, but I did over 3.5 times more revenue in my ninth year of business than I had done in my first 8. And then I've incrementally built and scaled that for the last 13 years. And that's the story. Because when people think about a franchise and they think, well, I want to talk to the people that are failing. I'm like, why? Like, what are they going to offer your dream? Right? If they really knew why they were failing, like they're going to give you a reason. But if they really knew, wouldn't they change it? Because nobody set out to fail. So it changed everything with how I coach. So if you talk to me in 2002 to 2009, I had one reality. I was an average performing consultant at best. And then in 2011, I was standing on the highest mountaintop. I made history. I'm like, I was a history maker. They called me Roger Bannister, right? So I'm just me. So would you rather meet me when I figured it out? Or would you rather meet me when I was swirling around in the average pack? So when I share this with candidates, it really sets them free and helps them grasp that even in a franchise, you can fail. And in a franchise, it's still yours to make or break. It's still yours to actually work. So we know the plan works. The plan always worked. I just worked the plan a lot more effectively once I figured it out. So
So
hold on, Jonathan, the second part of your question is we do have people who start like a flooring company and then they realize they need better vendors or they need better sales processes generally. And we call that a conversion, where you take your mom and pop business, but it is very, very difficult to go from entrepreneur to franchisepreneur because so many times you know too much to be coachable. And the number one factor to success in a franchise, to fitting into that system, is following the franchisor's lead. So if you know too much about how something is done, sometimes it's better to go start a business where you're more humbled and willing to say, I don't know, I'm going to do exactly what you tell me to do, Mr. Franchisor.
you know what, I can relate to that. I used to get together on Saturdays and play with a band. And there's songs that I would play on my guitar that I could only play by myself. But if I learned a new one, I could play along with the guys that were there. Just because you get into your own cadence, your own rhythm, and you just can't get out of it.
It's hard.
So I have a whole bunch of questions now. I'm gonna
Oh,
try and
sure.
break them down one at a time. First and foremost, sounds like you do a ton of personal development. And I saw in your profile that you worked with Dennis Waitley. How'd that happen?
Oh my gosh. So this is a dream come true. So when I was 15 years old, my dad, so I competed in the Miss America pageant all growing up. From the time I was 12, I was Miss New Hampshire preteen 1984, Miss New Hampshire teen 1988, and Miss New Hampshire 1992. So the Miss America organization really is playground for personal development for young women. That's all it is, right? It's not Miss USA, which is beauty. Miss America is about interview and talent and really pulling out like the skills in a woman. So during this time, my dad gave me a book by Dennis Waitley called Being the Best or something like that. And I remember sitting on my floor in my room, devouring that book. It was the first personal development book I ever read, basically memorized. So the first company that I started it was at the dawn of the internet as a marketing tool. And so I created a health and fitness marketplace that I ended up getting partnered with usatoday.com. So if you went to usatoday.com and you clicked on health and fitness, it would actually click over to my company, which was doing business as behealthynow.com. So because of that national exposure through USA Today, I was able to go after really big advertising dollars. So we had a self-help section. So I reached out, like did some research, found Dr. Waitley's email address, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, like all the greats at the time, back in 1997, 98, and thought they're never going to reply to me. Well, Dennis Waitley actually replied. So we started, this was like amazing. The long and short is at the time, this was prior to 9/11. So you could go fly somewhere. He flew me to Salt Lake, which is where he lived. And he actually, I did some work with him beyond him being a sponsor of my motivation self-help section on my website. But he flew me to Salt Lake and he met me at the gate. Getting off the plane and being like, Dr. Dennis Waitley is waiting for me. And I gave him that book that my dad had given to me and he autographed it. And I still have his personal email and personal cell phone today. We are still friends.
That's
Amazing
amazing.
life fulfilling story, right? Yeah. You just never know who you're going to meet in a day. And that also happened with Denise Austin, who maybe you don't know, but she is a fitness personality. She was on TV before we had DVDs and all of that and live streaming, which she does now. Like on ESPN, they had the ESPN girls. They'd come on and work out, and you'd log in at like 1 o'clock and do the half-hour workout with them. Well, Denise Austin was sort of like the biggest name in the 80s. And anyway, she was hugely influential in my professional career. The same thing happened, but she needed a website, and we ended up spinning our business off, building web, because I was like, you need a website to work with us? Okay, we'll build you a website. I hung up the phone. I said to my guys, now we're in the website building business. Like, that's how fly by the seat. So then she wanted to meet me. And then I ended up, listen to this story. I ended up pitching, totally off of franchising. I ended up pitching Lifetime TV. That was her TV channel that she was partnered with at the time. So we flew to New York because I had the crazy idea. We were trying to build her community online. So I was like, let's ask Lifetime TV to promote your website during the commercial breaks of your show. 1998, 1999. We flew to New York City. I was like, what, 27 years old? Pitched these Lifetime TV executives, and they were like, wait a minute. You want people to be on their computer at the same time they're watching TV? And they laughed me out of the room. It's just ahead of my time.
You know what? I can totally relate to that because I tried to put video on the internet back in like 2003, and every investor I spoke to laughed at me. You're video on the internet?
We were
So,
ahead of our time, Jeff. Ahead of our
right,
time.
right. Now I'm behind it, I think. Okay, so
Anyway.
back to what you were talking about, the difference between 2009 and 2011. What was the difference maker that happened in you for that to become such a successful year?
Yep. So what happened is I got sick and tired of producing the same result. What really happened is, let's talk about my dad again. So my dad, there was this little funny sarcastic joke that would come out of my dad's mouth. He'd be like, when he'd tell people his daughter was a consultant, and he'd look at me and he'd be like, the first time it was like, Kimberly, to the rest of the world, when you say you're a consultant, because remember, he wanted me to go to medical school. Okay. So Kimberly, to the rest of the world, when you say you're a consultant, that means you're either unemployed or you're one of the highest paid people in the world. Well, I was spending a lot more time at the unemployed feeling, and I got sick and tired of it. I was a summa cum laude graduate. I was a smart girl. I was determined to prove him wrong, prove myself that I could do better. And so I started thinking about my business a little bit differently. For the first time in my 9th year of business, I started looking at, what's the tipping point? The tipping point is having more people. If I had more people to play with, statistically, more people, like you funnel more in, more and more are going to fall out. Like, it's not groundbreaking. It was just thinking for myself versus just being a robot, right? This is just what we do. We show up, franchise gives me leads. And if they have leads for me, I work them. And if they don't, I sit here bored. That's what I did for 8 years. That's what most franchisees do. They believe it's the franchisor's job to build their business. Wait a minute. I bought a business. Why isn't the franchisor going to generate my customers for me? Why are they? If they could find your customers for you, why would they need you? Finding customers is what owning a business is all about. Remember, I was a science major, not a business major. So it took me 9 years to figure that out. So once I figured that out, I committed myself to, all right, I'm going to learn prospecting. I had zero skill, but I did have some skill because I did it when I owned my own business, but zero skill in this business. but I just said, I'm going to find one per day, which at the moment felt like Mount Everest because I had never done it. But again, I was determined. So I cleared my schedule every single day. I did the hard stuff first. Like now that I've really been studying personal development and I listened to I've read so many books, all the things I did that first year are things that the greatest people in personal development tell you to do to be successful. I didn't hear them then. I created it. So I feel like I'm the creator of it, really, but in my own reality. But here's the thing, like, even if you read a book, this is what I've learned. Reading doesn't make it a tool. Putting it into practice and perfecting it is what makes it valuable to you as a tool. So when you look at that first year that I made history, here's the thing. I was only 80% effective at generating one lead per day, but 80% effective made me a history maker. So when I tell my people, perfection is not the goal. What is? Consistency. It's showing up for your dreams every single day and doing it even when you don't feel like doing it. Because what happened is, as I started to develop skill, I started getting leads. I started getting busier than I had ever been. And the tendency was, it's sort of like if you're losing weight and you're like at your dream weight, you're like, well, I'm going to stop working out because I'm good now, right? The tendency was to stop prospecting, but I said no, because I committed myself with the rhetorical question, what would happen if? Instead of focusing on all the people in my pipeline, I focused on stacking the top of the pipeline for 1 year. Well, what would happen is Kim would end up building the largest pipeline consistently that had ever been built, and she would break records and make history.
So
Not rocket science, it's just a math problem.
how did you find those prospects?
So very good question. I first started calling old people who were in my people I had worked with who didn't buy. And then I would say, if it's not for you, do you have a referral? I started asking for referrals. And to this day, every single person that talks to me on the phone, whether they buy a franchise or not, I ask them for a referral. Like, again, you'll hear great people say referrals are your best customers. I'm like, that is so true. And I proved it to myself before I ever heard anybody say that, right? The best people who come to me come from me from people who bought a franchise before. And they're almost always likely to buy because they already come with the belief that it's for them because their friend did it, right? But even people who don't buy, I say, look, I offered you a free service. Could you do me a favor? 2 things. Write me a review because I helped you in some way figure out it wasn't for you or for you now. And could you think about who you might know, who you think would be a good candidate? So referrals. And then there was a time when I started buying additional leads, but I stopped doing that very quickly because as I started mining all my data, it was very evident, like after the first couple of years of doing this, I was like, all right, I got to keep getting better, right? So I started getting all of my KPIs. And the biggest one that I looked at was like, what are your closing ratios? Like, where did the lead come from? Did they buy a franchise? And what was the speed at which they bought the franchise? As if I had no influence on these things. And I do to some part, but not all, right? But so I was 1 in 8 at the time. When I started taking out buying leads and running the data, on paper, I was 1 in 5. So that was like a no-brainer. Do not pay for leads, right? They're costly and they're sucking up your time and energy and they're not even buying franchises. So like, this is what I tell my people, right? Like, so the franchisor has the plan. The plan never changed. It was how effectively I started working my plan. Prior to 2010, I never even knew we had KPIs. Franchise always gathered all this data. I just didn't use it and nobody talked about it. Now we talk about it, but we didn't back then. So I tell my people, don't wait till your 10th year in business. Gather your KPIs from year 1. Know what your closing ratios are. Read books on how to become a more effective influencer or leader or run a better sales process. Because as I started to say, all right, when people say no in my business, why do they say no? There's only so many objections, right? In your head, it feels like all these people have all these different objections. But when you really stop and think about it, every sales process only has the same dozen objections. So what if you could start to eliminate those objections before they come up? And or better yet, prospect for people like referrals, where objections don't come up. So if somebody was meeting me from the internet, the level of trust is not there, right? Like somebody who meets me from a referral. That's what I mean by certain objections that come up from this lead source never come up over here. So like you really get to, it's all a math problem. And so when people are like, oh, the competition, I'm like, competition doesn't matter. Identify your customer. Like sometimes franchisors will be like, Kim, how do we get a Kim Daly lead? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't prospect for people that would be interested in your business. And they're like, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of consultants don't run a business like I run. I know exactly the person that's my person. I don't want everybody out there. I want a very specific person. So I know where to find them, and that's where I invest my time. And so that means that there's some franchises out there that my person won't fit for. Does
So
that make sense?
makes a ton of sense. I want to go back to what you said about going back to really your past prospects, your past, be it people who've done business with you or you've just met with them and asking for referrals, because that is something I will say that I have on my to-do list to go back through because it's something I'll say procrastinated on. But the what's the process, especially, I mean, you'd been in the business for what, I think 8 or 9 years at that point. You're going back to people who you hadn't spoken with for potentially 8 or 9 years. How was that process? How did you reapproach them, re-engage them, and ask for review, ask for referral?
Yeah. Number one, you got to pick up the phone and call. No texting, no emailing, leave voicemails. But it's more like when you're like, hey, remember me? Like at what point you were interested in a franchise? Like, what did you end up doing? You didn't buy a franchise. It's genuine curiosity and interest in what they decided to do. And you know what? Sometimes people would be like, Kim, I'm so glad you called. It's like so funny because I never really got over that thought of owning a franchise. Maybe we should start the conversation again. Boom. You get a few of those, it spurs you on, right? You're going to get a lot of people you leave voicemails for, they never call you back. It's okay. It helps you clean out your pipeline, like, but you'll create a new pipeline. So it's tenacity. It's just not being afraid to hear no, not and not being in it for myself. So going back to when I really looked at what had finding one new person per day done for me, the number one thing it did was change my attitude about my business. Because when you're in a famine business, it's all about you because you need stuff. When you are in an overabundant environment, you need people to go away. It's about them. It's about them. You can give people the grace to be like, this isn't the right time. No problem. You're not calling me back. I'm not chasing you. You're not even worried about it. You need people to go away. So then my attitude toward everything that went wrong in my business was so different from when I was in a scarcity mentality and mindset here in my business, right? You see that? And so like I just did my first keynote and this is what I said. People come to franchising believing that it's something out there, their franchisor, their market, their brand, that's going to make them successful. But what you come to realize is what makes you successful is you. And when you decide and you own it and you figure out a plan, whatever the plan is, and you start working it, it's like going to the gym. You build muscle and you build confidence. And that confidence changes your attitude. And when you change the attitude, I love the name of your business because I always say, like, I'm going to get you in the daily grind. Now, this isn't the DAILY. This isn't what the rest of the world is doing. This is the DALY, my last name, the daily grind. And the daily grind has an abundance effect to it that when you tip that first domino with your activity, doors that were closed start to open, right? People who said no start to say yes. I'm telling you, there were people who started to buy franchises from me because they wanted what I had. They sensed my passion. They sensed like this, my belief, but it wasn't fake. It was real because franchising was changing my life, right? So I was giving them who I was becoming and they wanted to become that same thing. But in every sales process, it's that conviction, right? That helps people believe in what you're selling. So it's not like there's a science to what I do, but it's the magic. The daily grind, the DALY grind, has a magical effect to it because the abundance that you create through your positive attitude and by doing enough activity that there's abundance all around you means that you can give the graceful out. You know, people are going to say no to you and it's okay. And people, when you need something, they never say yes to you. But when you don't need them, you attract way more to you. And that includes referral sources, right? I don't need you to send me a referral, but you know what? I'd love it. Like, this is a great place to be if you know somebody. And I don't ask more than once. I don't need to. People are so excited to help me because what I did for them was for free. Sometimes, even in the middle of working with me, they're referring people. Oh my God, I was talking to somebody last night about you. Like, how do I send you a referral? Or I've even asked them. That's the daily grind. That's the one you want to be in.
You know what? I think you are 100% right that passion is contagious, excitement is contagious, and once you start hitting your stride, people are just attracted to you like moths to a flame.
Totally.
Where in the process? So you hook somebody up with a franchise. Do you like then step out, or do you help them make that transition into the new life?
You should ask. So for the last 22 years, officially, I go away, what I call on the wedding day. My job is to get you prepared for your wedding day, marry you off to the franchisor, and kiss you goodbye. Happily ever after is yours. But my heart, after all these years and knowing like how people really struggle. So franchisors are amazing, like strategy coaches. But I love how Albert Einstein said, logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will get you everywhere. And I saw this equation in Forbes magazine that said success equals 20% strategy and 80% mindset. And I was like, that's so true. I had the strategy for 8 years and I was average. But when I added the mindset, I was history making. So my heart is in sharing the mindset coaching with people, but it's figuring out how to monetize that. And it's changing horses midstream when I built this massive a business that's a dream business to every other consultant out there. So I'm starting to create some passive programming that I can sell to people, maybe eventually sell into franchisors to incorporate into their training. I did my first keynote. I have my second one coming up later this year inside a franchise organization. So my heart is in, I helped you say yes to the first yes, but now I really want to help you say yes to the second yes. And the second yes is showing up for your dream every single day, especially when it's harder than you thought it was going to be, which let's be real. It's always harder than we thought it was going to be.
You know what? I used to tell people you're not actually in business until you've cried yourself to sleep over your business.
A few times. And woken up the next day to get up and do it again, right? You can't quit. Failure is not an option. It's winning or learning. The failure is when you quit. And I mean, I don't shame anybody. If you got to quit, you got to quit, but there's always a way to figure it out. But it takes money. It takes money and it takes perseverance.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever worked with network marketing companies, MLM?
I love people that come from network marketing companies because they're the hungriest, hustling people I ever met in my life. Oh, I have one of them now. I was like, you don't even have to tell me that you came from Amway. Like I knew you were a network marketer, like before you said it. And he knows it. I'm like, these franchisors are going to eat you alive. Like they're going to be chomping at the bit to get you into their brand. So no, it's funny. My parents were involved in network marketing. I grew up going to like the rah-rah meetings and I was like, oh, this is great. But in theory, like, no, I really haven't been on the business side, only on the buying vitamins and supplements side.
Okay.
The customer. I'm the customer.
It's just interesting to me because that's how I got my start into sales and stuff back in like 2007 was I got recruited into a network marketing company. Great for personal development, great for learning all of this stuff. It's amazing, but it's years later after having been out of it for a decade or so, I see that the franchise model is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And what you said about you said the first yes, but the second yes is saying yes to your business. that applies across the board. Because you know, if you're working by yourself at home at a computer, or if you're managing 30 employees at a store, it's going to get on top of you. And at some point, it's going to frustrate you. You're going to ask yourself, why the hell did I do this? And if you don't have the chutzpah to get through that part, you're done.
Yeah. I use the word grit. On my podcast, I interview a lot of franchisors and I always ask, what are you looking for? What's the criteria? You know, it's not an MBA, it's not prior business ownership experience. It's always the word grit. Because if you're not gritty, you're going to quit when it gets hard.
Mhm.
And no franchisor wants to disclose you as a failure. In our industry, they have to disclose failures. They don't want failures. So, you know, they have a risk in this relationship too. It's not all about you, Mr. Franchisee. That's why franchises, good ones, are awarded, not just sold to somebody who fogs up a mirror, right? They're really which is why they pay me, right? Because they're looking for a certain person that they believe they can coach and mentor, who has enough money to weather it, but also has that kind of intangible grit factor, or tangible.
So
So
sorry, go ahead, JT.
I was just about to ask the question to understand. I mean, you mentioned the money. We've spoken about the kind of the mental attitude you need to have to get into it, but kind of what's a minimum someone needs to actually consider franchise as an option?
So there's all levels of investment, Jonathan. There's like businesses under 100,000. There's some that are 3, 4, 5 million, right? All the way up to hotels, which would be multi-million. So um, what I'll say to answer that question is money buys options. The more money you have, the more options you have. But what I will also say is more money in does not mean more money out. In fact, I would argue it's the opposite. If you're the right person to take that lower investment sales driven model, you could make indefinite amounts of money. And the best example that people will get is like a real estate agent. So what determines, if you're a real estate agent, whether you move 10 homes a year or 10 homes a month? You. So those lower investment options are more owner driven, where you have the capacity to go figure out your sales and drive sales. And so, to the extent that you're willing to rise and grind and drive that sales process, you can make unlimited amounts of money. You could go and build like a Massage Envy, right? Which may be 700,000 all in. But you know what? You're going to have a physical cap to how much money you can make. Because if you have 15 therapy rooms in a Massage Envy, at some point, every room you have will be booked every single hour you're open. So that gets frustrating when I wake up with a crick in my neck and I want to go get a massage and I can't get in all the time. I'm going to cancel my membership, right? So the name of the game there is you got to be able to scale by building multiple locations. So one physical building may have a cap, but then you could keep growing more if there were other units available for sale in your area. But when I meet a candidate, I gather some initial net worth information that helps me guide gently. And then when we get into the full hour-long call, I take the time to educate every single person on what their money buys. So before we ever talk about specific brands, I'm going to show you the whole world and why different franchise businesses cost different amount. And without making any earnings claims, because it's illegal for me to do so, I'm also going to explain to you why some have more of that unlimited earning potential based on an owner, and why some are more capped based on a location.
You talked about my person, knowing exactly who they are and where they are. Do you create a client avatar before you go, or have you created?
Oh, yeah. So this is what you learn in business, right? Like, and my keynote that I just did for a portable moving and storage company, you know, I did some validation with their owners before, and they were grumbling about, oh, the competition beats us on price, and so I couldn't wait to get on that stage and be like, it was like, you only have to care about who your competition is when you are not clear what your core values are, because when you know your core values, so I don't need everybody, I don't want everybody, right? There's a certain investor. I mentioned the very first thing I said to you, the people who are my avatars. You guys answer it. Do you remember what I said first thing?
Um,
Oh, it's a quiz.
yes, absolutely.
Role reversal.
People who are looking to transition out. Yeah,
So
there was a lot more to it, but I remember that part.
exactly, real estate investors who are looking for diversification, amazing avatar for me, right? I love them the most because they've already taken risk in their life with their own money, right?
Mm,
So there's so much less objection. There's so much less education they have to go through to really get what we're doing here in building a franchise. That's my number one avatar. But you cannot dismiss the W-2 employee looking to feeling a glass ceiling. Maybe they love their job, but they're just a glass ceiling. And or maybe they need a health insurance benefit, or for some reason they want to keep it. Maybe it's just security, it's the lifeline. But I gotta grow, right? And I have time and freedom I have time to do that. And then the people who again have that, like if you're in telecom or high tech, software sales, you defense contract industries that typically go through cycles, oil and gas, where like it's good you got a job, it's bad you lose your job, pharma. I love those people because they are like, I got to create something that I own and control because I know I'm the highest paid person at the next downturn. I'm on the chopping block. So there's like certain, but and the messaging that I give out on all of my, social media, it's very targeted to very specific people. I don't need everybody. And then even within those groups, I don't want everybody. And I feel like the reason I love social media as a way to generate, sometimes it's for social credibility, but I think also it helps people discern, is she my girl? Because I'm very motivational in that, like, I want to focus on your mindset. And the logical guy who's like, doesn't want to talk about magic, he's not going to call me. And I'm totally fine with that because I'm not going to resonate with the way he thinks either. Right. It would just be a waste of both of our time and frustration to the max. So that's what I mean. But there is probably a consultant out there who speaks to that mindset. Go find that person.
do you find that franchising follows a market cycle?
Ooh, so this is what I learned years ago from that very first job I had in franchising. My very first mentor taught me that in good times and bad, the franchise industry grows. So when the economy is bad, our industry, I would say, is actually better. When there's a scarcity mentality in W-2, like unemployment, recession, companies, more and more people have to get control and they turn to franchising because it buys down the learning curve of starting a business. There's a safety net there, way better than entrepreneurship. In good times, when money is flowing, people are wealth building. They have money, they want to invest it, they want to make more money. So, in good times and bad, people are investing. What they invest in changes, but they still invest. So, like in the pandemic and in this time we're in now, not so much right now. I feel like the rest of the world is crying recession, but here in franchising, we know nothing of that. Like, I mean, people are buying fitness and wellness day spas and like all kinds of crazy big investments. Going back to during the pandemic where it was home services, those more essential things, those were really big at the time, which typically is what people turn to in a recessionary time. Like, okay, may not be sexy, but people always need, a plumber.
Hmm.
So, right. Versus like fitness. Ooh, are people going to come in? And if there's a recession, are people going to come in? Yes. But for some mindsets, that's a big fat no.
This has been absolutely fascinating. I can't believe our hour's up. I just looked at the clock. I'm like, oh. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with, or anything that you would like to get from being here?
You guys have been amazing. The one thing we haven't said, and I definitely want to say, is franchising is way more than food and retail. So, as America's top franchise consultant, you will have to beg me to show you food. There are easier, faster, better ways to make money than food. So, I will leave it at that. You can call me and we will talk it out, but let's leave it there. So if you're intrigued by what I'm saying, also sometimes people feel like, oh, she must be way too busy. I'm not too busy. This is why I prospect like this because I want to meet as many people as I can. I'm not too busy. You will work with me, not my junior associate, and I will make time for you. and I will teach you something. Whether it's the right thing for you, I don't know. Only you can decide that, but we'll decide it. You'll decide it pretty quickly. It's about 1 to 2 weeks to a no. It's about 1 to 2 months to a yes.
Amazing. I'm sorry, I just got chills when you said that. That's something I never even thought about was the timeline. That was cool. Thank you so much, Kim. This has been amazing. How do people find you?
My pleasure. So my website is thedalycoach.com, but you just have to Google my name. I have over 800 videos on YouTube and Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to contact me directly, thedalycoach.com, Daly, but just Google Kim Daly, go where you like to go, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. And so there's so much content out there that you can find out more about my personality and what I do before you reach out directly to me.
You're amazing, Kim. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
JT, anything to wrap it up?
Kim, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm inspired from speaking with you
I'm
here, so
fired
thank you
up
so
right now.
much.
I'm gonna go
You
run
guys are
laps around
sweet.
my building.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for listening. If you made it all the way through and you want to know more about Kim, you can certainly go to thedalycoach.com. For Jonathan and I, you can go to guidetothegrind.com and or amortgageplan.com to find out more about us. Thank you so much for listening. Give us a like, share, comment. All those things help so much. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you soon.